Hello, everybody. It's now Wednesday, the 26th of May, 2021. And before I move on, I want to remind you to click on the notification bell in the upper right to be notified of future episodes, and click on the subscription button below to become a subscriber to Civil War Chat. Okay, I'm going to pull up my notes and we'll get started on today's episode, which is basically ask a rhetorical question. Did 1860 Republicans want to ban the spread of slavery or the spread of blacks? Venerable historian James McPherson claims that the 1860 Republican Party platform plank prohibiting the spread of slavery into the federal territories prompted the South to cause the Civil War. Although it is commonly averred by him and his acolytes that the Republican goal was to quarantine slaves in the South, the true objective may have been to restrict the geographic spread of blacks to the rest of America, restrict that spread whether or not they were slaves or free blacks. It didn't matter. It might be that all they really wanted to do was to restrict the spread of black residents into parts of the country where they had a minimal presence. Consider, for example, that all but 2 of the 22 states granted statehood after Texas in 1845, down to the present day, 176 years later, all of them joined the Union when blacks represented only about 1% of their respective populations. The 2 exceptions were the southern border states of West Virginia and Oklahoma. 90% of America's blacks still lived in the South in 1910, nearly 50 years after the Civil War. The 1860 Republican Party's ban on slavery expansion plank originated 14 years earlier in 1846 when Pennsylvania Congressman and future Republican David Wilmot introduced a rider to a $2 million funding bill for the then current Mexican War. If passed, which it was not, his rider would ban slavery in any territories acquired because of the war. It was not, however, an enlightened racial gesture. Wilmot admitted, quote, "I make no war upon the South, nor upon slavery in the South. I have no sympathy for the slave. I plead the cause of white freemen. I would preserve for free white labor a fair country where the sons of toil of my own race and own color," and he was white, "can live without the disgrace which association with Negro slavery brings upon free labor," close quote. 8 years later, in 1854, future President Lincoln said, quote, "The whole nation is interested that the best use shall be made of these Western territories. We want them for the homes of free white people," close quote. 4 years afterward, in 1858, Illinois Republican Senator Lyman Trumbull said, quote, "We, the Republican Party, are the white man's party," close quote. The same year, Massachusetts Republican Senator Henry Wilson said, quote, "I do not believe in the equality of the African with the white race," close quote. The year Lincoln was elected president in 1860, his future Secretary of State, William Seward, said, quote, "The great fact is now fully realized that the African race here in America is a foreign element incapable of assimilation," close quote. Frank Blair, whose brother would become Lincoln's Postmaster General, told audiences that, quote, "The Republican Party is the white man's party and will keep the territories," meaning the federal territories, particularly those west of Texas and the Missouri River, "and will keep those territories for white men," close quote. Prior to the war, the so-called free states contained only 2% of America's black population, and 94% of them could not vote. During the Civil War in April 1864, Congress scorned a proposal by Kentucky Senator Garrett Davis that refugee blacks be distributed to the northern states in, quote, "proportion to their white populations," close quote. That same year, it rejected an amendment to the Freedmen's Bureau bill by West Virginia Senator Waitman Willey that would empower the Bureau to contact the governors and mayors of northern states and cities to arrange for Black settlements in the North. Of course, that was kicked out. They didn't pass that bill. They didn't pass that amendment. When Lincoln's Interior Secretary suggested in December 1863 that blacks be sent to the far west where he believed, quote, Negro labor was in great demand, close quote, his party turned him down. Instead, on July 4th, 1864, the Republicans passed America's first major immigration law, basically targeted at bringing in white Europeans. The Northern Republicans that generally controlled the federal government until Woodrow Wilson's presidency kept blacks mostly quarantined in the South until World War I. It took almost 50 years after the Civil War before they truly started to diffuse, even in the slightest way, into other parts of the country. Even then, Northerners accepted blacks due to worker shortages. They accepted blacks only due to worker shortages triggered by the World War demand surge combined with the war's disruption of European immigration. From 1860 to 1920, 60 years, America absorbed 50 million white immigrants, mostly into the northern manufacturing economy, thereby leaving little opportunity for the South's 4 million ex-slaves and their descendants to prosper in the North. Nope, the objective was to keep them in the South. According to historian C. Van Woodward, the antebellum states of Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois set the racial norms for the future states that would grow into the land to the Missouri River and beyond the Missouri River. He wrote, quote, their chief argument against slavery was that it would eventually produce a free black population, close quote, even as, quote, black exclusion, close quote, became a top political goal for the Midwestern states. The region never had more than 1% of its population composed of blacks until well into the 20th century. 30 years before the Civil War, when French nobleman Alexis de Tocqueville toured America in 1831-32, he indirectly warned of racism endemic to the whites north and west of the Ohio River. His journal reveals that racial prejudice was, quote, stronger in the states where Americans have abolished slavery than where it still exists, and nowhere stronger than in those states where the servitude has never been known, close quote. Among the states and territories he visited where slavery had never existed were Wisconsin, Michigan, and Ohio. In his book, What Lincoln Believed, The Values of America's Greatest President, author Michael Lind writes, quote, for Lincoln, the movement against the extension of slavery was half of a program to create a white West, the other half of which consisted of state laws designed to keep blacks out of northern and western states. For example, the Indiana territorial legislature outlawed black court testimony in cases involving whites. 1803, blacks in the militia, 1807, and black voting, 1810. In 1815, an annual tax was imposed on all black men. The nearby Illinois territory legislature passed a bill in 1813 requiring every incoming black to leave. Failure to comply was punishable by 39 lashes repeated every 15 days until the black offender left the state. Lincoln was well aware of such black laws and voted for them repeatedly in Illinois because he felt they were necessary to prevent racial integration. J.P. Morgan once said, a man always has two reasons for the things he does, a good one and the real one. The legendary banker was implying that the good reason is a false benevolent explanation that conceals the true self-serving one. So I'll leave it you to decide whether or not the Republican Party in 1860 really wanted to ban slavery per se into the federal territories, or if they really wanted to simply ban blacks, whether slave or free, into those territories as well as into their own states. One explanation is the one they give us, and the other one is the true one. So I'll just leave it at that. If you want to learn more about this, get Causes of the Civil War by Philip Lee. The book came out last October, and you can buy it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon for $22. If you'd like a autographed copy, email me, Phil, Phil _Lee, Leigh, at me.com. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.